you the breakdown that I came up with. Yeah. So one of the things that I was doing when I was thinking about it, I was like, how many sections do we have in our lives? And especially for you guys, if maybe I'm guessing you're in your early 20s or mid 20s, how many sections are in your life, And I figured whether you're 20 something or 60 something, those sections are the same. Like if you're thinking of a 60-year-old person, 40-year-old person, or 20-year-old person, these sections and segments of life are the same. So the segments I came up with, sorry, I had some notes written here, so I just want to quickly go to them. So as my phone decides to open, okay. So the first one I came up with, and why this I put first, is because I think this is one of the things I honestly wish I got someone to tell me is serious, is socially. Friends, I know you're like, please, chick, like, we know our friends, we got that going. But that's the first segment. Our social life, because family and friends, I think, is so important. Maybe it hits you so late in life, and when you're younger, you're just like, I can wing it. I know how this is done, kind of thing. But so, so important. So that's the first segment I put down, which I think is important. The second one, which I think is very, very important, is financial. Yeah. Um, this is also for me something very, like, I don't think anybody ever sat me down to walk me through that. And both for the socially aspect and financially aspect are things that I think I've learned through experience, like not because people have taught me. And you know how you say, if I sat with my younger self, what I would say, those would be the first two things. And I'll break them down. I'm just going through them. So those are the two segments that I think is important. And then the spiritually. Why spiritually comes third? It's not because it's third in importance, but I think it's because, especially when you're in the Christian fold, you get a lot of people who, share with you about Jesus, having your quiet time, what to do when you go through the hard times and things like that. So I didn't feel so green about it. And I was in so many of these groups, I did X-Cans, and after that I joined something else for young adults and things like that. Yeah. The other thing that I think is important, especially in this season, is emotions. How is that segment of your life doing? And then there's the mental aspect, which I think is important. I'll talk a lot about physical as well, because I think it's important as well. And I'll keep it to those three, those segments, so that there's social, there's financial, there's spiritual, then there's emotional stroke mental, and physical, yeah, which I think are very, very important. So that's what I will cover today. And even as I cover that, I'll go through my story and aspects like that. So let's go. Yeah, I hope if you're writing notes, that I still don't have a title for my message. As we go, I'll get a title and I'll share. But yes, we are on segments of life, and those are the segments that I've shared. So I want to start with socially, and I'm hoping each of you has a piece of paper or pen, because I'd rather you write down on paper. But if you don't, please pick up, how do I call it? Like, pick up your phone and you can write on that, as long as you don't get distracted and get onto Instagram and things like that. Yeah. So socially for me is so important because, oh my goodness, I think that sets the foundation for life, and I think it's one of those things that we take lightly, because I don't know if any of you right now sits down and audits yourself and you're like, the friends I have, and especially at that age. And if you do, like, I give you marks, I think that's awesome. But what I find is that when I was younger, like, I remember my dad once, I was asking him for credit, and so I'm like, Daddy, please give me money for credit and all that. And he's like, to call who? I'm here. That's what he said. So I'm like, well, you're here, but I want to call my friends. So he's like, it will hit you one day in life, but these friends you're investing time and money on, might not be there at that point in life. So it's like, you'd rather invest in us, your family. So of course, at that time, I'm just like, this old guy, like, he doesn't know. He doesn't know where the gist and excitement of life is, I didn't understand. But right now, the number of times I think back to that conversation and I'm like, oh my gosh, he was so right. You have no idea. And I just want to break this down a bit and give you a few stories. So I'll give you an example. And it's friends that we keep. Yeah. So when I was in high school, I had this big dream, and well, you could call me vain. Probably if it was your friend in high school, you'd think it was a lot of vanity. But I had this dream in my heart to be on TV and be on radio and be on magazines, you know. And I don't know where that dream came from. It probably just came from Jesus. And I'd just be like, oh, I can't wait for the day I'll be on TV and on radio. And I remember so many times, you know how you have preps in high school? So before preps starts, I hope that's what you call it in all your schools, you know, like how you do the studies at night. I remember I'd stand in front of the class and I'd tell guys, you know, the day I'll be presenting on TV, this is how I'm going to do it. You know, so I did just all these weird things and all that. And a few years later, I'm out of high school, waiting to, no, I'd actually joined campus, I think I was in second year, and I'm watching family TV, and I see an ad and they're looking for presenters, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go for this. And I remember my mom saying, no, 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 we can't let you go to Nairobi, because of course I was living on the outskirts of Nairobi. We can't let you go to Nairobi. You know, people get stolen in Nairobi. And I'm like, no, let me go. I'll just da da da. They're like, no, if you've saved money, you go. And my dad was like, no child of mine is going to do TV and radio. TV and radio is for blondes. They're just given a script. All they have to do is read, you know. But the dream was so real. So I asked them, you know what, if I've saved my money, can I go? And they were like, yes. So I only had transport. I didn't even have money for lunch that day. And if the transport would have been hiked, that would have been sunk. And so, and I lived one of those places where it was like between 50, I was going to say 50,000, between 50 shillings and 70 shillings to get to town. And of course, the family media station was like 20 shillings away now from town, because it was in Kileleshwa. So, you know, so I needed like probably around 200 shillings. And I remember just thinking, gosh, you know, this is all my savings. But anyway, so I went. I took my 200 shillings and I went. And God being so faithful, I'd never been to Kileleshwa before. And also I'd been to Nairobi very rarely, you know, like with my family and stuff like that. So I didn't even know Nairobi so well. And I know you're thinking, please, you were in campus, you must have known Nairobi. So I went to high school in Kikuyu. And then now for campus, I was in Lower Kabete. So, and then I grew up in Tigoni. If you know Limuru, I grew up in Tigoni. So now when you take a matatu from Tigoni to town, it drops you at Koja Mosque. To get to Lower Kabete campus, you take a matatu from Koja to now Lower Kabete. So that was my life. I only knew Koja that roundabout, because I get into the mat like that. Yeah? So anyway, so I was explaining that to show you like how I didn't understand town. So anyway, when I enter the mat, I meet some guy. He's a pal of mine now from, you know, our neighborhood. So he's like, he's actually going to Kileleshwa. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, you know. So I went with him the whole way. I think he even paid for me the 20 bob to Kileleshwa or something. Anyway, and so I went to the studio. He even showed me this where the studio is, and I went in, which was so good. And the queue was so long. I remember it had like gone so far. There were like 300, I think, people or something. And so someone takes a speaker and they're like, if you didn't carry your resume, you know, on hard copy, you know, like your CV and, you know, your certificates, please leave. We're starting the auditions, but if you don't have your documents, please leave. And God being so faithful, we'd been trained that in campus at that time. And so I had my documents with me. So that's note number one, yeah? Always have your documents. Even in this age of, you know, like the digital age, people still ask for your hard copies. So just carry them. Anyway, so I get into the queue, and I remember the few people I told I'm going for this interview were like, please, Faith, like get off your high horse. You've never done journalism, you know. I was super plus size, you know, so like TV, like slim chicks, like get with the, you know, program. And I just knew it was my dream, and so I went for it. And so yeah, I queue, and luckily we reduced to around 100 people, and I do all the auditions. I remember I didn't have the papers. They even asked, you know, who has their journalism and all that. Guys raised their hands. I didn't, but I still auditioned, luckily. And yeah, and went through the whole thing till the final. And yeah, and I made it. I'm just cutting the long story short. And I remember even in high school, when I would stand in front and tell guys my dream, guys would look at me like I'm crazy. But there are friends who are with me then in high school, who are my friends still today. Modoni knows some of them. And I remember they believed that I could do it. Yeah, even though I was so chubby and I'd not done journalism. But there were friends of mine who, like, called me and they're like, Faith, you won't, like, stop forcing. You're good in your books, just go to med school and do your medicine. Because that's what I wanted to do at that time as well. I wanted to get into med school, and they're like, you're good in your books, just focus on your line. But there was that desire in my heart, and I went for it, and I got in, and I did TV and radio, and I've continued to do it, on and off as the years have come. So what am I trying to say? I know it's obvious. You've probably had people say, show me your friends, and I'll show you your character. But I always say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. you know and I'll just let that sink in. Just show me your friends and I'll show you your future. I was telling Modoni, I just left, Friday was my last day at Oracle, and I remember they did a lunch for me, like a sort of party. And so when we went for this party, imagine with COVID, yeah, I know I need to be pinched, but I kept my mask on the whole time. And so when we had the party, the place where the party was looked like there was a gig with so many young people. And I remember seeing one young girl, and she was wearing such a short dress, like, even calling it a belt was an understatement. And immediately she walked into this restaurant, like, everybody turned. You could just see everyone, I guess either jazzed, shocked, whichever place you fall in. And I was so tempted to go talk to her, because I'm one of those. I'm a fossa. People call me a fossa because, if I see you and I want to say something, I will. But I worried, but like maybe she wouldn't listen. And I remember walking up to her. I mean, thinking that I should walk up to her. And what I was going to tell her, I remember, was, you know, uh, that I wish she would see herself 10 years from now, and maybe she'd regret, what she's doing at that point. And why I could confidently have those thoughts is because I have so many friends who I am, how old am I again? I am 36. I'm one of those, I'm not shy about my age. I'm 36. I think I turned 37 this year, if I'm not wrong. And I know so many friends of mine who I was with, especially in campus, who lived that wild life. And they're like, I just wish I would go back, like 10 years back, to being 25, to being 23, and just change a few things, because the friends they kept at that time and the things they did at that time and how those friends let them, do those things at that time, and how that has affected them now. So, and I know God is able to turn around even the mistakes we make for good, but maybe some of those things will take you 5 steps back. So if you can avoid them, even better. And so that's why I can't stress enough the socially, the importance of minding your friends, like mindfully pick your friends. Don't go like, oh, we just meet for coffee, imagine, some of those things have hit me when I'm in my 30s. Like I've gone like, okay, every time I meet this girl, when by the time I'm done with coffee with them, I'm either depressed, like there's some people you meet, they just drain you, and it took so many years for me to realize that I shouldn't be meeting this kind of people. And so that's the first thing I want to tell you: mind your friends. And I'll give you one final story. A very close friend of mine was dating someone, and she was dating this guy. And this is one of those friends of mine who are like high achievers, go big or go home kind of person. And so she dated this guy for a few years. And to cut the long story short, when they ended up breaking up, and she sort of found out a few things about this guy and just figured, hey, this is not a good guy, and left him. And it hit her how much this man had changed how she looked at life. So, and it's the same thing, if I was dating someone and I'm telling them I want to go try out on TV and radio, and they're like, no, what if they tell you no? But what if they tell me yes? So maybe you should be hanging out with the people who tell you what if they tell you yes, because it's just different scenarios in life, how people look at things, and you need those sort of people. And so this friend of mine said, like, by the time she was done dating this guy, she felt like she'd lost 5 years of her life, and like she was 5 years back. So that means if she was like 25, she felt like she'd gone back 20 years, and she needed to catch up. Maybe because of the conversations she had with this guy, that sort of affected her confidence. And maybe he didn't mean to, but maybe if his outlook of life is, maybe you're thinking, I want to end up, going to Yale University. And this person is like, no, 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 no. What about if you just do, a Kenyan university? Imagine there's nothing wrong with a Kenyan university. And truly, there's nothing wrong with a Kenyan university. But why not have that big dream? And I hope you understand what I mean. And I'm spending so much time with socially because it affects everything else. The friends you hang out with affect how you use your money. Because if you hang out with friends who every end of the month, they're like, so we've made this 10 Gs, we go shopping, we just use our money, right? And or they're like, can we put this money together and just buy that big bucket of KFC, and there's nothing wrong with these things, but if that's all you ever do with your money, well, I guess there's something wrong with that. Because in another world somewhere, there's someone who's 23 or 25 and they're CEO of $1 million company, So it's just that sort of way of thinking. And they're friends you hang out with and they challenge you spiritually. I have those kind of friends and I look forward to when I have to meet them. I'll meet with someone and they'll be like, I spend time with Jesus and, this is what I'm learning. And I'll be like, gosh, am I learning anything this season? And they just snap you back to reality. And so socially is the foundation for everything we'll say today, because it affects everything. If you hang out with friends who watch you taking your sodas and eating badly every day and they don't tell you, they don't tell you, hey, maybe you should reduce on this or things like that, then maybe you need to check that. So do you get what I mean by socially? That it sets the foundation for everything. So let's think about that. Let's think about our friends, yeah? And if you're writing notes, I think at this point you can write down who is your board of directors, who is in your board of directors, yeah? And what I mean by that is that I have found this very valuable, and a mentor of mine is the one who first asked me that question, who is in my board of directors? And I keep saying, if companies come up with strategies, companies have boards, companies have a plan, companies have a vision board, why can't we have that as individuals? Yeah. And I'll even add, yeah, even the enemy has a strategy. Yeah. And by this I mean the devil, Satan. He has a strategy. I always say, I read this book by Joyce Meyer, Battle of the Mind. And in one of the chapters she talks about how it's like literally the devil sits down and they're like, this is the plan we have for this person or things like that, but if even the enemy has that plan, why not have a plan yourself? And even the word of the Lord says, put your vision down. So do you have that vision down? Or do your friends think it's quirky to put a vision board up? If you even have a vision board, please put on the chat room. I'm very interested to hear if anyone has a vision board. And in case you're wondering what is that, I'll take you through that quickly. So a vision board, you can write it on your journal, you can write it on a book somewhere, or you can have it put together. I wish I have a vision board, but I'd have to walk away to get it. Maybe what I'll do, I'll take a picture, I'll send to Modoni and she can share in the WhatsApp group. Modoni, you'll remind me, please. So a vision board, like you can get a nice, all right, thank you. So you can get a nice big piece of cardboard or manila paper, then put your dreams down. Those dreams that maybe you're even embarrassed about, like one of my dreams I shared with someone the other day and she really laughed. She's like, gosh, Faith, like you're a bit crazy. But those dreams, they make your face light up. And in fact, the ones that look impossible, put those down on that vision board. And what I do is that we do it with my husband, actually. We also stick pictures, like there's that dream house we want to have. We put that down and stick pictures, where you want to be spiritually, find whether it's read the Bible through the year, find a picture that suits that, put that up. If you have a vision of, the number of children you want to have, put that up. You want to buy a car by the end of this year, put that up. The number of books that you want to read, put that up. So you stick it up. It doesn't have to be super organized. It depends. If you're, have OCD, please, you can have it in order. And you just put it somewhere in your house where you can look at it daily and it reminds you. And you know what I think is fun, guys? And I just thought about this, so I'll share. It's the start of the half of the year. So we could say Happy New Year, but of half year. And I know the first year, part of this year has been crazy, with Corona and everything. But I believe so much in my heart that despite this crisis and this pandemic, that I don't think God will waste this, if we're intentional. Like if we go before him and we're like, God, what would you have me do in this season? I don't think he'll waste that. And if we go before him and, I remember one of the biggest questions I asked, especially when I was young, is what did you make me for? And that he gives you the platform, to use those gifts and talents. I think this is an amazing season. You have more time to reflect because I guess you're indoors more. Use that time to figure that out. Use that time to come up with that vision board. Write that vision down, and God blesses that vision. And you know what else you do after you put it down? Pray about it and just take steps of faith. If it's a YouTube channel you've been wanting to start, please start it. Just take the step of faith and you'll be amazed how it will take off. If you've wanted to write a book, write it. If you want to design clothes and sell, if you want to, I don't know what it is that you want to, someone talked about baking, just start baking and selling that, make a few shillings on the side. Maybe you're out there and someone always comments how when you clean your dad's car, like it's amazing, like no car wash can clean that well. Imagine, make that into a business, make money. Someone was telling me the other day how in the Chinese language, crisis, how Chinese language has characters, yeah? I hope that makes sense to all of us. So how it has characters, that crisis is two words, and it's opportunity and challenge, yeah? I think they use a different word instead of challenge, but it's opportunity and like difficulty. Yeah, that's the word they use. So the two characters that make up the word crisis is opportunity and difficulty. So I believe that is so God ordained, that this crisis, there's opportunity and there's the difficulty. So choose which side you'll be on. I choose opportunity, and just figure out what God is saying about this side, and how you can even turn this difficulty into opportunity, and pray about it. I always ask God to give me the mind of Christ, and he always does. He'll always reveal to me, what to do, which direction to go, and please just take time to do that, especially with your age. And so that's what I mean about socially, that come up with that vision board. And if you have friends who laugh at you about that vision board, maybe those are people you need to keep on the outskirts of your, core of friends, yeah? And one of the other things that's important, and this I'm saying now as I begin to move into financially, is to put your goals, we talk about SMART goals, that they're measurable and all those things, but also think about it this way, like tell yourself, if I want to get married in 5 years time, what do I need to do now to be ready 5 years from now? If I want to read the Bible between July and December, what does that mean for me now? It means maybe I need to set aside 2 hours every day to be able to get there. So for every vision, for everything you put down, think about what you need to start doing now to get there. Because the other thing we do is that, okay, I want 1 million shillings in my account by the end of this year. And then now you go like, cheers, vision board, I'll see you on the other side. And then now you move on. And when you do that, then nothing happens really. So still think about, for every dream, think about the details. If you've been trusting God for a car, and you're like, God, buy me this car, and you don't want to take a loan for it, for example. So you're saying, what do I need to do now? Yeah, to be at maybe 600,000 for the car I want to buy. Maybe it means you need to be saving 50,000 shillings every month, or however how you work around it. But you know what, guys? keep Jesus so close, let him know about these dreams, ask him to edit them, you know. And I keep saying there's nothing better than having that blank page and God just coming in and filling it in and putting that up. So take this time and let it be exciting as you work on, you know, being future ready with Jesus. And I think that will be awesome. And now back as I close on socially, my goodness, when we're talking about your board of directors, you know, I want you to think about that. Write that down. It can be your homework. And maybe if you guys have like teams and maybe team leaders in those groups, it's maybe things you can even discuss further. You know, ask yourself, who's in your board of directors? Who do you need to get to where you want to get? And you know, to know where you want to get, you'll have to have thought about it, put up that vision board. Then now you can sit and go like, you know, if this is what I want to do, that informs my day. So you won't spend your whole day on, what is that thing called, PlayStation, you know, because like I'm telling you, you might be on PlayStation, someone is coming up with a new version of PlayStation as you play CD PlayStation 3, and I think there's PlayStation 5, you know what I mean? And you see, for as long as you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So you can afford to spend, since COVID happened, March, April, May, June, you know, you're just marinating in your digs, just doing random things and go like, you know what, I'm young, let me just chill here. I'll get online a bit, you know, check out what's happening, post a selfie, you know, and things like that, you know, and move on, you know. But if you know where you're going, trust me, you will not waste that time now. And I encourage every young person I meet and encourage myself that the next big things will come from Kenyans, will come from this generation. You know, I always challenge guys, if you guys have heard of Airbnb, you know, this business where you can let your house, you know, and I was like, that should have happened in Africa. There is no place, and maybe even in Kenya, because there's no place where people host people like Kenyans. You know, like I can bet each of us at some point in our lives had a Rela living in our house. That was Airbnb in the happening. So why did it have to happen in the Western world? Maybe it's because us guys are still thinking, you know, I'm young, let me just chill and things like that, you know. And out there, guys at 18, your parents tell you, move out. If you're not moving out, you're starting to pay for rent, electricity, and all that, you know. So they're pushed into adulting earlier, you know. So let me push you guys into adulting earlier. Take time to think about these things. Take time to figure out, even though I'm living with my parents, how do I, you know, change the world to come with the gifts that God has given me? So be challenged, and let's change this world for Jesus, because I believe God wants to use young people like you, young people like us who are Christians, and place us in these places for his glory and also to impact lives. So don't miss out. Imagine, don't miss out. And you're lucky you're getting someone to tell you this now. And so I've told you about the vision board. So put that down. Then once you do that, look at this vision board and go like, who do I need in my board of directors for me to achieve what is on this vision board? So that you go like, I'll give you an example of myself. One of the things that I've put on my vision board is, you know, like certain places I want to get to in my career. So one of the things I've been very intentional in this season is to find, and we're doing that with my husband, is to intentionally find a mentor couple who can walk with us in our new season, you know, because you need someone to walk with you, you know, even as you're in your career, someone who can be there to help you know how to raise boys, because we have our 3 kids are all boys. So we're very intentional to get a couple that can help us with that as well, you know, so that there's, that we're also intentional in our marriage, in how we raise our kids and all that, you know. So that's one of the things on our vision board, and that's how we've actualized it. One of the other things we want to do is build our own home. So we've also found a couple that we feel, you know, are, you know, demon chasing, Bible believing, you know, kind of thing. And we also love how they took time to build their home without a loan and things like that. And they're part of our board of directors. I hope that is beginning to make sense, you know. So figure out who is in your board of directors. Another important person in our board of directors is a lawyer. I think that's very important. So that, you know, if you have certain questions to do with contracts, if you're starting a biashara or it's to do with employment, you have someone to go to, and they form part of your board of directors. If you're thinking of buying a car, maybe you need a banker as, someone in your board of directors, or a financial expert to advise you with that, and maybe you need a pastor, someone who, is there for you, stands with you in prayer and things like that. So think about, when you finish putting down all your dreams, think about that. If you want to go to Biashara, one of the people, hands down, that has to be on your board of directors is a tax expert, so that you can understand that from the word go, someone who tells you this is how cash flow works and things like that. So I hope you're understanding me. So when you put your vision board down, when you're done with that, then work out your board of directors. And that will also inform what you do every day. And I've already talked about that. So that you don't spend your day just randomly living, you spend it intentionally and with the right motives, because you're going somewhere. And because the time God has given you, even today, the 24 hours he gave you today, you'll never have another 24 hours like this again. When it's gone, it's gone. And I know that so well, because there's sometimes I'm like, gosh, I wish when I was single, that I did this with my time, because now my time is different, like it has to be split up into so many other things. And it's something I tell young people to pray about, ask God, now that I'm not married yet, that I'm, still single, that I, maybe you haven't found a job yet, what do I do with this time for your glory, and let God guide you, so that in every season of your life, you have used it to its full potential. Because there are things you can do now that you probably cannot be able to do in a different season of life, because that's life, it's seasons. Yeah, so that's something else to think about. And so that's the full scope of socially. I'll let you guys put questions on that, but that sets the foundation, and it's covered spiritually. If you heard me say, because you want someone who challenges you. You don't want to hang out with people who, when you're done, you're like, Maze, God, let me just pause and ask for forgiveness. Because of hanging out with these people, I ended up cursing. Because of hanging out with these people, I ended up gossiping. And by the way, gossiping, even just sitting with people, even though you're not gossiping, you're just like, gosh, you guys are so bad, but you sit there listening, that's still wrong. Unless you're making people stop, it's not right. So if you're around people who are not edifying you, I don't mean now you are like, please, I don't hang out with such people, but you just decide who makes your inner core of friends. You get what I mean? And that way, they're the ones who are truly influencing you, because you just need to remember, if you show me your friends, I will show you your future. Yeah, I will not only show you your character, I will show you your future. And that's how strong who you keep close. Yeah, and if you show me how you spend your day, I will also show you your future. Yeah, so if you can also look at how your day is and how you line up since you woke up. Maybe you woke up at 12 p.m. and then maybe you had your lunch. I remember when I just finished high school before I joined campus, I'll do a lot of high school ministry and things like that with a ministry group was in where I lived. It was called Tigoni Youth Group. So we did a lot of high school things and all that. But the days we're not doing those outreaches, I was a typical teenager. Like I'd wake up at 12, make myself a bowl of chips and sit and eat it. Then in the afternoon, go looking for a plan, And I remember thinking to myself the other day, now when I look back, maybe I would have been the Airbnb star now if I'd, maybe just taken time and all that. But I guess it's a balance to be able to still live your youthful life and enjoy it, and still live your purpose. So yeah, just get that balance as well. So that's our A. Is right to cut off friends. I think someone is asking a question. It's okay to cut off friends. There are some that really need to be cut off. And there's some that you just know, this is my inner core. These are the ones I tell my dreams. These are the ones that I spend most of my time with and prioritize spending my time with. And then you keep the outer core, just as a big community of friends. But I'm telling you that because you're young. But as you grow older, that number just dwindles, because also maybe you don't have all this time to meet 20 different friends. I remember when I was getting married, like it was such hard work figuring out who to put on my line, because I had so many friends, so God helped me, because a lot of them were expecting at the time. So I was able to say, okay, the expecting ones, I'm sorry, I won't put you on the line because I care about you and all that. But it was just helping me, But now I keep telling myself, now if I was getting married now, please, coming up with 5 or 6 friends will be so easy. Like I can name them for you. But at that time, it wasn't that way. So over time, even life cuts off people, and I know Pastor Mogoni could even attest to that. But you find they're just people you're not hanging out too much with and things like that. And the friends who come in for certain seasons and come out and all that. And I always say God has a beautiful way of pruning. Where God is taking you, if He feels certain people shouldn't be your friends, maybe they'll be pulled out, not because they're bad, but because maybe for that block of your life. And He adds other friends. But what I always do is pray. Everywhere I go, even when I join a new organization, I'm like, God, give me friends for this season. When I start a new school, I'll pray for friends. And He's always been so faithful to give me friends. And I'm like, friends who will edify me, who will correct me when I'm wrong and things like that. So as you grow older, life cuts them out. It won't even have to be you. But now when you're young, when, like you have fans, you have so many friends, it's okay to just decide who takes your inner core and who takes the outer core. Yeah. And do that prayerfully so that God guides you, because He knows the bigger picture and He knows your future. So that's socially. And like I said, it affects your emotions as well, because you could hang out with some people and you're always depressed, because they'll always be telling you, I don't think Faith, me, I don't think you can do that. The way you're chubby, I think guys just like tall, slim girls for that. There are friends who will always put you down that way. I'll tell you, you're a certain way, just negative talk. You need to avoid being around those people, or correct them about that. If they are a very good friend, and you tell them, what, we're good friends and I love you, but um, uh sorry, I put a timer, so they're also able to guide you on the direction that you should go, sorry, so that you can also be able to guide them on the direction they should go. And we should be those kind of friends, because we have some friends, but we see this thing is not good, and you tell them, I don't like how you talk to me when this and this happens, so you can decide to take that approach as well, so that they can be wholesome friends for you mentally and emotionally, that they stand with you, when you go through the hard things and things like that. Yeah. And so that's the bigger picture. And that's that I've handled socially, and I've covered mentally and emotionally. I financially is covered there, but I want to handle that separately. And I spoke about physically, and I'll give you guys an example. By the time I left high school, and if you've met me, I'm like 5 feet or less. Yeah, so I'm quite short. But by the time I left high school, and probably when Mudoni met me, I was probably 100 and some kgs. Yeah, like I was so chubby and cute. So and then so that was after high school. Then of course in high school we used to like have so much junk. It was so weird anyway. So and then I just now when I went back home and all that, I just started to lose the weight. I was in a dance group, and so I guess that helped me lose weight as well. So by the time I was joining campus, I was around probably 80 something kgs, 88 or thereabouts. And yeah, so I went to campus, like maybe got to 85 or something. Then by the time I started working and living alone, I just lost all my weight. Also because I'm a sanguine, I like eating with people and things like that. So my weight just all went down. But then it wasn't me looking to lose the weight. But what has happened as I've grown older, like now, I remember when I had my third born, which was last year, because he's turning 1 this month, I was 97 kgs, and I remember one day just praying and telling God, give me a solution for this weight, because I think I'd reached a place where I'm like, gosh, my body doesn't even feel like my own. I just feel like I need a bit more energy to keep up with these boys and things like that. And God gave me a solution. And so I got into some clean eating sort of lifestyle and all that. So I'm not telling you guys to do that, because I think you can ask Jesus and he'll guide you on what path works for you. But what I'm trying to say, that I think it's important what you do physically as well, because it informs the kind of energies you have now and even later. I know of friends who regret wearing very high heels because they're like now in their older years, they just can only wear flats and their back is bad, and people who wish they hadn't eaten so badly when they were younger, because now they can hardly have any of those things, because you know how these things affect your health, and now you're told you don't have sugar, don't have wheat, don't have all those things. So I feel it's important for me to mention, because I think it also sets the foundation for us physically. And you know what happens, you know, I see CEOs in this group, I see people who will be senior pastors as well, and or missionaries in certain areas, or leading whatever organization that God leads you to. And you don't want to even be that artist, for example, and you get on stage and people have to help you up the stairs because you can't walk, because you're not healthy and things like that. Or you don't want to be that person who doesn't have that right foundation in terms of habit. Yeah. And that habit is when you wake up, what time you do your prayers. You know, right now maybe it's easy because you have all the time, so you're like, today I'll do my QT at lunchtime, tomorrow I'll do it in the morning. But you know, form those habits now, because tomorrow when you're busy, when you're leading an organization, you don't have to crumble. You know, I know so many people who once they got into that senior position, let me say CEO for example, you know, then you just put on weight, then you're unhealthy, then you start having severe heart issues, but it's because of certain habits you haven't set. And forget even food. You know, if you don't set other habits, like when you have your quiet time, then when you're older, you know, then you don't have that time, and you'll be like, when was the last time I prayed? When was the last time I read my Bible? And then you notice things like anxiety beginning to bug you. And it's because you're not spending time with the giver of life, you know, to just center you and give you your sanity before you face the world. And so I encourage you to get those habits right, you know. Decide when you, I wish someone told me that. I've had to learn that the hard way. You know, I wish someone told me, decide when you pray. You know, is it going to be morning? Is it 5:30? And that becomes my life principle, that people just know between 5:30 and 6:30, you can never get in touch with Faith. She's meeting with her king, and full stop. You know, I wish I said that. You know, at some point I think in campus that was clear, but you know, when I started working, I just made that flexible. I'd be like, you know, I've woken up late, let me rush to work. At lunchtime, instead of me eating, I'll go sit somewhere and I'll do my prayers. But you see what happens, you know, if that lunchtime you could be called for a meeting, you know, so you end up losing it along the way. So set that habit, you know, and set it in a smart way, so that no matter whether you're married, you have children or whatever, that it's clear that this is my time with Jesus, and that way you can be able to keep it through life. And so that's that to do with physically. And I know the physically has taken a different form, but it's discipline, you know, and you will see whether it's socially, emotionally, mentally, financially, physically, you need discipline, and you need to form the right habits. You need to form the right disciplines. Whether it's reading through the Bible, you need discipline, you need the habit. Whether it's reading 12 books in a year, you need the habit, you need the discipline. Yeah. And since I've talked about books, let me just mention, it's so important for us to keep learning. If you're not learning, you're not growing. Yeah. And right now, when you're younger, you can probably have enough books you can read with your time now, because maybe you don't have a night routine to put somebody to sleep, and you know, and all these things. So if you can just create that time to spend time reading, and once you form those habits, it's so cool even as you grow older and you find all these other books. And I'll tell you what, you have the blessing of having something like this where you get to learn, but you also learn from books. People put so much experiences in their books, so you don't have to make the same mistake somebody else made. You know, I remember before I even started dating, I read a lot of books on, you know, what Jesus has to say about, you know, all these dating stories and things like that. And it spared me so much, you know, in terms of, you know, how you wonder who should you get married to, and how will you know, and things like that. There are books out there, there are blogs out there, you know. So with God's guiding, just figure out those kind of books as well. But you stop learning, you stop growing. And that is even more so with the word of God. You know, it's so core for life. And you know, I know people say it's the manual for life, and you're like, yeah, that just sounds good. It's so true. I keep telling guys, I have used the word of God in my workplace, you know, like where you're talking about where God needs to break the enemy and break the jaw and you see the reality there, where you're talking about God going before you, blessing you as you walk in and walk out, things that you claim over your life, claim over your work, and you see them coming to pass. You know, those verses that say, as far as you can see, I will give it to you. Do not conform to the standards of this world. You know, each and every one of those, fear not, they're in God's word, and we can use them for our lives now and even in the days to come. You know, so spend that time with Jesus, form that habit now, and just let everything just feel around that proper core, where Jesus is that center. And so I know my time is running out, so I believe I've covered every segment, and I was leaving financially to cover last. Probably if Modoni had asked me to do this talk last year, I'd not have taken financially as seriously as I've taken now. But it's also because there's some things I've learned in the last few months that have just changed my life. Like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know how to explain, like, but majorly changed my life. And so a friend of mine introduced me to something called Dave Ramsey, and it's a fantastic book. You can write that down and you can read his book. So I'll try handle this in 5 minutes, but there's so much material online, and he's a Christian as well. And so, you know, like my husband and I, like how we've even handled our finances, and even how I handled before I got married, is just with what you know, what you saw your parents doing and things like that. But I don't know whether you ever sit down and you're like, Maze, like, is this it? Is this how far God wanted me to go with finances? And this Dave Ramsey book answered that question for me. And I'll just quickly take us through, because every time someone asks me, what do I wish someone told me when I was young? The first thing I always talk about after socially is financially, because I started working very early. I started doing my TV and radio shows when I was in third year. And, you know, if you know media, you know, they pay you so well for, you know, like you get good money for just being on radio for 30 minutes or an hour, you know, so you're there, you make noise, you laugh, you give a good joke, and you get paid well. But because I did not have a plan for this money and nobody advised me, let me tell you, I think I was known as the bank even in campus. You know, like guys in campus would be like, oh, you're broke. I just go ask Faith for a 5 sock. And, you know, because I was working and I had the money and I didn't have a plan for it, I'll just give, you know. I'll never forget once meeting someone on the street who was like, you know, they just need 20 bob. And I was like, why should I give you 20 bob? Let me give you a G. You know, that just shows you money without purpose. And I know there's so many of us as young people, you know, maybe we have money our parents give us, or you're working, or you have your own side hustle and you're making money, and you don't know what to do with it. And I remember one of my very first mentors telling me, and I think I've mentioned it in this event today, that you need to have a plan for that money. So you decide you want to be a millionaire by the time you're 30. If you get that million in your account and you have no plan for it, it will go as if it was 10 shillings, you know? And that's the same thing that would happen with the earnings I had, you know? So the only thing I know I did right was I always tithe the money that my parents gave me and the money that I earned. And I think that's a good discipline to also learn, you know, learn to tithe 100 shillings, yeah, and then learn to tithe 1,000 shillings. So tomorrow when you have 1,000,000 shillings, you'll be able to tithe. Trust me, you know, don't think, when I'll have 1,000,000 shillings, that'll be so much money. It can be so difficult to tithe. But can you imagine, I've been given a sock by my parents to tithe 10 bob. That one is hard, it's little money. But trust me, it's 10%. It doesn't change anything. 10% of 1,000,000, 10% of 100 bob. Same, you know, same thing, same difference, you know. So form that habit as well, you know. And so there's some things I've learned with Dave Ramsey that I want to take us through. So number one, and what I'll ask you to do is that you can get onto Google and even look for the 7 baby steps of Dave Ramsey, and you'll see them, and you can use them in whatever stage of life you're in. So the first, what do I call it? The first baby step he talks about is saving. And one of the verses that Dave Ramsey uses is the verse that talks about how, you know, that we are masters to the people we owe money. Yes. So if you owe someone money, you borrow them any idea to soak your fare, that person is your master because you owe them money. Yeah. And the other thing that's important to note is that he talks about the verse that and I'll share these verses with Modoni, just because of time I won't go through them. The verse that talks about how we should release ourselves, you know, from the hand of this debtor, like the gazelle does to the hunter. Well, the debtor part is not in the verse, but there's a verse that talks about, you know, how getting free as a gazelle does from the grip of the hunter. And so he talks about living your like no one else now so that you can live like nobody else later. And that means certain things, you know. So maybe if I ask you today how many of you have savings, you'll be like please, Faith, like, you know, I'm barely making anything. I only earn 10,000 shillings. No matter how much you earn, you should still be able to save because you should live within your means. So my first point is to take us out of that mindset of I need to be earning 40 G's for me to have savings or for me to live a certain life. Whatever amount you make, you live within those means. And I remember once speaking to a group of people like this, just like a month or so ago. And one young man was like, but Faith, I earn 10 G's, you know, like, how do I make that work? And I remember trying to explain to him, and this was really by God's wisdom. And I was telling him, when I used to earn that kind of money, I even looked for roommates so that I don't live alone, so that way my rent is down. You know, so you look for creative ways. So it doesn't mean because you earn 10 G's, you look for a house for 8 G's and you just have 2 G's left. So you're always in debt and always broke. No, find roommates, you know, find people you can live with, or live with a relative, live with family, you know, just be creative. Ask God to reveal to you. One of the girls I mentor until the other day was living in a house that was worth, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 shillings. So I believe it's possible. In fact, she just sent me a video just last night and she's moved into her big 1-bedroom house. God is so good. And so we have to be able to be smart that way with our money and learn to live within our means, you know. And ask yourself, do I really need to buy these new shoes? Do I really need to buy this new dress? You know, so when my husband and I decided to go through this Dave Ramsey baby steps, it calls for a lot, you know, like total denial, not eating out and things like that, to just be able to get to where we want to financially. And it talks about a few things that are so important, you know, just saving up, you know, and you need to build that kind of fund. And no, maybe you're like, no, I'm saving up now, I have no kids, you know, I don't need this or the other. But you also need to save because you not always be 25. So those savings that you put today could, if put in a good investment plan, could make you such good money 10 years from now. You know, I know there's some investments that I did 10 years ago when I just started working that are beginning to mature now. And I'm like, what? Thank God I did that, because then now my kids are going to school and I need school fees, you know? And so don't think just in the short term. It might not be school fees for your children. It might be school fees for you. It might be you one day coming upon a house that you want to buy, and then now you have that money, or a ministry you want to support and you want to give a lump sum and you have it, you know. So for whatever space you are in life, you know, let's learn to save. Every time money comes into your hands, you know, an uncle gives you 1,000 bob, go buy soda, you know, think about what to use that money for. Yeah, instead of just going like, wow, well, guys, I'm throwing sodas today, you know, and KFC, and you meet, you finish their 1,000 shillings, then we chill and wait for the next one, you know. And then the day there's a trip for excans, you're like, gosh, can you guys sort me out? I don't have any money. Yet you had that 1,000 shillings, you know. And this is even the best time to do even 100 side hustles. The gig economy is growing so much. In fact, I was reading an article that was saying how it's, I think it was $190 million. That's the value of the gig economy, and the online gig economy, you know. There's a girl I mentor who is paid such good money, and she just writes for people online, you know, these people who do like Google articles or Wikipedia or stuff like that. So they send you a story, you put it properly, then they put it in Wikipedia, you're paid. Things you can do just on the side even as you go to school, or all these other things. But it's things that even though it's not what you'll do for the rest of your life, just give you a discipline now, you know, so that later it can be easier for you. So that even when you're older, if you lose a job, you're not disoriented. You've done this before. You've done what we call gazelle intense, you know, where you're trying to get out of, you know, that hunter's hand and things like that. Yeah. And so the first step, baby step for Dave Ramsey is to save. And he says you save 100,000 shillings. Yeah. And maybe I'm going through these steps and you're like, it doesn't make sense for me right now. It still does if you put it into your space. And if you feel it doesn't, just hold on to it. It will make sense in no time, even for later in life. And so he says you put down 100,000 shillings. And it's like, if it's hard, go gazelle intense. What can you sell? You know, I'm looking at Jerry Njuguna's picture, and you know, if we sold his shades and his leather jacket, we'd probably make 100,000 shillings. You know, I'm just checking one of the profile pictures here. You know, on my screen. And so maybe there's that leather jacket you can sell. I remember when we started doing our Dave Ramsey, the first thing we did was sell my car, because we were like, you know what, let's just sell this car. It's a depreciating asset. And thank God we did, because of a COVID. I've just been in the house, I haven't needed it. But we did it because we were going through these baby steps, you know. And so there are certain things that you can sell. You know, there are shoes you don't wear. You know, find someone who can buy it. And nowadays there's so many platforms to sell used things, and you get your 100,000 shillings, and you keep that as your emergency fund. Then you move to baby step 2, and it talks about going through all your loans. Write them down from smallest to largest. And if you don't know, for loans, it's always best to do the snowballing. So you start with the smallest, going to the biggest, yeah? And I don't mean loans only in the bank. If there's someone you owe 5Gs, someone you borrowed to sock, you know, just go back and pay off, so you start on a clean slate. And so you go through all this debt and you make sure it's fully paid for. That's baby step 2. And with Dave Ramsey, once you finish one step, then you go to the next one. And the third one, he talks about an emergency fund. Now you can grow your emergency fund. So with the emergency fund, he says, think about your expenses per month. So maybe your expenses per month come to 15 Gs. So you're like, okay, if I didn't have a job, or if my parents could not give me money anymore, I would need 15,000 shillings every month. And maybe you could even add your school fees if you want, but let's work with 15,000 shillings. So how many months would I need before I can get a job? Yeah, so you go like maybe 6 months or 10 months, yeah? So you go like, okay, so this 15,000 times 10 months, yeah, comes to what amount? So you do that calculation, 15,000 times 10 months, and that comes to, I think, 150,000. So you know that for emergency fund, you need 150,000. And so again, you hustle, sell a few things, do side gigs here and there, grow that emergency fund. You remember we had 100,000? So if your expenses is 15,000, you grow 150. If your expenses is 20,000 per month, do more, yeah? And decide the number of months. If the kind of career you're in, it takes you a month to get a job, you can do that. But it helps to have a big enough emergency fund. So the day you don't have a job, or things are not working, or the person you who pays your bills or whatever is, God forbid, no longer there, you still have a bit of cushioning for a few months. And that's baby step 3. Baby step 4 is pension. And I know you're like, please, chick, I'm 20. You know, like, why do you want me to get pension? It is so important, because it takes care of you when you're older. And it doesn't even have to be in your 60s, you know, because the kind of investments there are nowadays, it can even take care of you younger. But you know what's scary? Where the world is going, we won't need our pension when we're 60. By the time, probably in another 10 years, retirement age will come lower, you know, probably to be like when you're 40 or 45, which is not too far. If you take your 20, it means you have another 20 years to work, then you start thinking about retirement. So if I were you, I beg, I would start putting my pension down now, yeah? And if God wills and you end up being a billionaire, it's just extra cash for you to even quit all your jobs and go traveling around the world, you know, or to help a children's home, or you set up one, you know, for whichever way you will to do with your money. And so that's baby step 4. Then baby step 5 is college fund. And I'll say this is college fund for your children or for yourself. Yeah, and what I've been advised is to take, my oldest son is 5 years old. So I know he will need to be in high school or uni, maybe in another 10 years, for example. So I need to go to Old Mutual and tell them, how much do I need to, and Old Mutual is an example, for example, and tell them, how much do I need to give you now so that I can be at X amount in 10 years time to be able to pay my kids' school fees, yeah? And you can do that for yourself, even for you to go back to school. You know, maybe you want, you know, the other day I did during the COVID period, actually, I managed to do 2 executive MBAs by God's grace. And I got someone to sponsor me, but each of these courses was $4,000. Can you imagine? $4,000. That would have been $8,000. That's almost 1,000,000 shillings. Yeah. And it was actually slightly cheaper because most of it was online. So thank God I got sponsored for it. But can you imagine if I had to pay for that? You know, will I pay school fees for my kids, or will I pay for myself? So even if you don't use that college fund for your children, it can even be for you the day you want to advance your education, or the day you want to bless someone who's going back to school. And so you can do that college fund where you put aside, you say, if I want 1,000,000 shillings to do an executive MBA, how much do I need to put down now to get there? And you know, some of these Ivy League schools, the fees is so expensive, you know, because like one of the schools I was doing was Yale University. So, and maybe you'll be like, I'll just do the local one in Kenya, you know, and maybe that one will be cheaper. That's fine. But what I've learned and I've been sharing, you know, with some few people is that these international sort of schools, you also get such a big world view. I know where the world is going, we are also global citizens. So if you want to get even just that big picture, because the kind of examples you use in the class and things like that, you would be looking at those kind of schools. And if you're looking at those kind of schools, then you need that college fund. And nothing stops you from that 15,000 you earn every month, putting even 5,000 to go towards that, or even 1,000 to go towards pension every month, 1,000 to go towards college fund. And maybe that 2,000 shillings will be over one day when you take your crush for coffee at Java. Yeah. So use it the right way. And yeah, please take your crush for coffee. But yeah, you can also tell them, I won't take you to Java because I'm doing something called Dave Ramsey that will secure a future for my future wife, you know, in case that's them or not. Yeah. So it still makes sense either way. So you understand. So we are on baby step 5 and we've done college fund. Then now baby step 6 talks about building your home. The other day I met someone who started building his house when he was like, I think 23, you know, and by the time he got married, the house was done and dusted. Can you believe? I was like, that is so impressive. I'd never met anybody like that before. You know, someone who as in like had Jipangad like that. I was like, dude, people who are 23 are not thinking about a house, you know, like building your own house. So it's like he sacrificed when guys were going out to do what? He knew that's a bag of cement, you know. But you can imagine how many steps ahead he is, you know, and I encourage us to think that way. Of course, live a little and enjoy your life. But remember, Dave Ramsey says, live like no one else now, and you will live like nobody else later. If you get what that means like right now you can be on rice on beans and living like no one else because maybe other guys on pork ribs and honey glazed lamb chops. But later you can be buying even a whole nation those pork ribs, you know, because of how God will have blessed you because of being a good steward of your money. So baby step 6, yeah, you pay off a mortgage, you can build. And what he advises, if you take a mortgage, take 10 years. But you see, if you have a good culture of saving, you can buy a piece of land, build, even with good planning, and you won't even need to take a loan. But if you decide to take a mortgage, he says take a mortgage for 80%, 20% pay cash. And then now you can build your home or buy that home and pay back in 10 years if you take a loan for that. And then baby step 7 is so amazing. He calls it create wealth and give, you know. And I keep saying every time I read Dave Ramsey, I'm like, Kenyans do it the other way around. We take loans to buy plots. You know, we just up plots, we have savings, nini. And you know, in one of his YouTube channels, Dave Ramsey was like, the sad thing is that God forbid when you're not there, you know, your kids will look at that piece of land that's 15 million shillings and they need money immediately. They'll sell it for the quickest price to get maybe the 2 million that they need to use at that time. But if you have these pension funds and college fund, it's things that take 2-3 days, you know, and your children have the money for school fees or whatever it is. So let's be smart about it. So once we get to baby step 7, then now we can start looking for money to buy plots and all that, you know, that at least we are sure we are out of debt and things like that. And you keep that cycle going. If you get a loan, go back to baby step 2, finish it, come back to these other ones and all that, you know. Let's get out of this rat race of buying big cars at loans. I worked in a bank and I watched people doing that, you know, paying for your school fees with a loan. If you can be able to start saving now, then it's better. Save up for your car, you know, and now Uber is cheap, so you don't have to feel like the life has come to an end because you don't have a car. You can save up slowly and get that. And why I'm sharing all these things as I close, I'm so sorry, Mogoni, as I close, I'm sharing all these things to tell us that if all these things are clear in our minds now, it informs what you do daily. Yeah, it informs what you're taking your time to do daily. So if you look at your whole day, like if I check what I've done today and you ask yourself, what have I done today? Yeah, it's driven by what's on your vision board. It's driven by what you want to achieve. You see, like for me right now, I want to get to baby step 7. Yeah. So that determines what I do daily. Yeah. It determines like today we were at a mall. We needed to sort out my SIM card for my phone. And, you know, it will inform if, you know, before, because maybe I wasn't so serious about where my money goes, I'd be like, let's just ingia Java. have breakfast or something like that. But because I know what my money is for, like you don't even think about it. You're like, my rice and beans is at home. Let me go eat that, you know? And so it's the same thing for you guys. If these segments of life are clear for you and you have that vision board and you know where you're going and the road that is getting you there, that informs what you do today. So you won't just be chilling and thinking, you know what, let's eat, drink, and make merry. Then when we are older, we'll start to take life seriously. It doesn't work that way anymore. And life has also changed, you know. Before, a 20-year-old could be chilling and making merry. Not anymore, you know, because also if you think about even careers, you know, people are now taking in guys who are 18, and by the time you're 30, if you're not a guru at what you're doing, the young people coming in are already pushing you out. You know, that's a scary part. And younger people are coming up with business ideas and being taken up into organizations. So that means they'll push out the older people sooner. So if you're waiting to turn 30, my friend, that 30 is gonna be defined so differently at that time in our lives. So think about it now. And the other thing I want us to think of as I close is this world is changing, yes, and I know it's very uncertain, you know, but where do you feel God, uh, what do you feel God has planned for you for your future? And if you can't answer that question, there's nothing wrong with that. But what is wrong is that if you're not spending your time every day to figure out what that is. Yeah. You know, I read a book, it's an amazing book. I wish the title would come to my mind. Modoni, remind me about this book. I'll find it and I'll write it down. And that chapter, it's like an image in my head. I'll even find you that screenshot. And what this book says is that this guy was like in his 60s and he'd retired. And that's when it hit him what he was supposed to be doing in life. And so he was advising young people and he's saying, you know, if you're running from your child's soccer game or, you know, to your next job and things like that, and not taking time to give finding your purpose the seriousness it deserves, you will find it out too late. And so he's like, and that can only be found in silence when we lock out what's happening in the world and we spend that time before God, figuring out why he put us in this world. Then we can live a fulfilled life and we can also live a full life. Yeah. And so if you haven't figured that out yet, there is nothing wrong, but there's everything wrong if you're not trying to figure that out. I hope that makes sense. So let's take that time as well to figure that out. And once we do, just go for it. Just fly, just take off and just do that which God has put you in this world to do. And ask questions, you know, sit with Pastor Mopani and ask her, you know, how did you figure out what your purpose in life was, you know, or find somebody else and ask them, how did you figure that out? Ask people, what do you guys think are my strengths, you know, or listen when people say, oh, you're interesting to listen to, you know, I love to sit down and listen to you, and you're like, oh, write it down even though it doesn't make sense. And then you can figure that out later, you know, as you go. So take that time to figure that out. And that way it also informs a lot of your segments. You know, if someone tells you, hey, you're good in biashara, I think you should give this a try, write it down, you know, just give that a try. If you fail, you're like, cheers, I'll try again, you know, and you try again, and we keep going until we succeed. And so that's basically my share for today. I hope I've shared everything I wanted to share. I know I've overdone it, but yes. Oh, I had some points here. I'll just go through this very quickly. I just wrote this down because I thought it was interesting to mention, but I think I've talked about most. The first one I talked about coincidentally is keep time. And I know we take that lightly. I once missed an interview for a very big job, and they totally refused to consider me thereafter because I didn't keep time to the interview. And I had my reasons. I was coming all the way from Tigoni. I had to get to Nairobi. It was raining, there was traffic. So it took me like 2 hours to get to the interview. But what the interviewer said is, you know where you come from, you know there could have been certain things happening, you should have left earlier, you know. And so it's the way the world is going, it's not an excuse. So just learn to keep time, you know, just always automatically work with, I'm going to leave, you know, 1 hour earlier, 50 minutes earlier, depending on where you're going. The other thing is never stop learning. I talked about that. And go beyond, go the extra mile. 99% of the promotions I've gotten in my job career, I have gone the extra mile. I know of people who, even when they were in school, did certain proposals, presented them to banks or different companies, and because of that got jobs. Yeah. So always go the extra mile. If you hear of a company doing something and you have an idea, put that proposal down, go share there, see how it's gonna change around your life, And I know my first promotion that got me into management, and I think I was even 25, was when I sat down and I was like, the world is going retail banking in those days when equity was just getting into the market. And I went to my boss and I was like, we need to be doing this, And he's like, yeah, we've hired a boss to do that. And they got a few managers and it failed. These managers did not succeed, so to speak. And so I went to my boss, I was like, I want to give it a try, And I was like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And they allowed me to try it. It's one of my highlights of my career, most difficult, but most rewarding, So always seek to go the extra mile. My second one was later in my career when the bank I was working for was looking for a new innovation. And imagine the innovation I came up with was so Jesus-centered, because I was like, no bank was doing anything for churches, like no bank was thinking about a church and how the finances are managed, and to just support the church with a product that works for the church, because we're dealing with tithes and offerings. And so I came up with a product for that. I asked the bank to let me manage that. So I was put in charge of that under institutional banking. I told them I want to hire someone who's a pastor. I was able to get a pastor who was willing to work for a bank at that time. It was a young man. He was doing a bit of pastoring, but was willing to work. And, and we were able to take this thing to the next level, And I remember when the bank I was working for went into receivership, this segment was one of the ones the governor of CBK talked about, saying was a big deal, saying they were impressed that, something small like this would have become so big. Going the extra mile. I could have chosen, by the way, when I joined the bank, to never give any idea, to never raise my hand and move on with life. And maybe I wouldn't be where I am today. But I thank God that he gave me the courage and boldness, to raise my hand. So let's learn to raise the hand. Let's learn to go the extra mile. I think that's important for me to share. And don't wait to be working in an organization to do that. Do it even now. Do you have an idea for Safaricom? Walk up to them and tell them, you know what, I put together this app, just tell me how we can make it work or whatever. Just don't keep quiet. Just go for it, yeah? And the other one is find out your strengths and passions and read more about it. Yeah. So find out about what your strengths are, what your passion is, and read more about it. How to harness those passions, how to push those strengths, and ask Jesus about it. Let him guide you on which way to go. And the final one is your story. Yeah, think about your story every once in a while and audit your story. Think about and go like, okay, so January to June, what has been my story? What have I done? It's amazing when you stop to think, even on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, it hits you the amazing things that you've done or the non-amazing things you've done. It's always amazing to audit. And like I told you, think of yourself as a company. If companies are coming up with strategies, come up with a strategy. If companies are coming up with audits, audit yourself as well, And it's interesting how when you do this sort of audits, how it reveals to you, where you should be going. And again, that's why you need that vision board, that board of directors, someone who's coming to tell you, you put this on your vision board 2 years ago, what's happening? And, it's not coming through. And that way you can be able to change around, So audit yourself and ask those difficult questions to yourself. I keep saying, don't look at yourself and go like, only ask, what have I done well? Think of yourself as your worst enemy and ask yourself, what have I not done well? This is my last point, I promise, Muthoni. The Americans, there's something, and you can read more about it, it's called red teaming, like red color, red teaming. And what the Americans did is that anytime they had an enemy, and they started this when China was the enemy, Russia and all that. So what they would do, and this is the military, they would try as much as possible to imitate the enemy, yeah, and then now ask certain questions in that regard. So they would copy what the enemy is doing, learn the enemy's ways, so that way they can be able to be better, be stronger, and also conquer the enemy. So ask yourself those kind of questions. Ask yourself, this degree I'm pursuing, is it going to be relevant 10 years from now? Might it be taken over by a robot? You know, because those are the things, someone who doesn't like you, those are the questions they'll tell you. They'll tell you, bro, that job you're on 5 years from now, it's going to be taken over by a robot. That's what mean people do. Yeah. But it's important for you to find someone who can do that for you or do it for yourself. So that way you form your own red team, and it can be yourself. And if you feel you can't be mean to yourself, get a red team to do that for you. So I hope that makes sense. And I am done. And yes, I will wait if there's any question. And I'm so sorry for overdoing it on time.
Thank you so much, Steve, for the many nuggets of wisdom. I think mimi notebook yangu sahi, it is already full. Looking for a new one. So if you haven't maybe written, enda tu hapo kwa chat box. I think Pastor Moroni has written out some few things now, screenshot. But I also want to open it up for maybe 2 or 3 questions. If anyone has a question, feel free to raise your hand.